Hi everyone, welcome to Bookies. I'm Bear, and thanks for clicking on the thumbnail and watching this video. You've reached the only YouTube channel that, when monetized, will provide 100% of the proceeds to local libraries and literacy programs. And so if you think that's a great idea, please subscribe. Let's be honest. You can tell by looking at me that I'm not the youngest individual doing book reviews on YouTube. However, that does mean that I have had the opportunity to read hundreds and hundreds of fantasy novels over the course of my lifetime. And it's kind of fine-tuned me to be able to know what is crap and what is good. And I'm not an easy rater. For me, I've only read one 5-star book this year, and that was Anxious People by Frederick Bachman, until I read The Devils by Joe Abercrombie. So yeah, The Devils is a 5-star novel, and I'm going to tell you why in a very no spoiler kind of way. I don't want to disclose any of the plot to you. The first thing you should know is that this novel is set in the ancient Mediterranean, so Abercrombie did not create a whole new world for you to enjoy. Rather, what he did is he took the geography of the Mediterranean and the history of the Mediterranean and twisted it in a very Joe Abercrombie-like way. So what do I mean? The religion of this world is governed by a 10-year-old female pope. The church is a little bit upside down from what you would expect from a church. It's kind of like the Church of the Renaissance headed by a Borgia pope. This church does not honestly speak of peace and love. Those words are merely window dressing for a corrupt and ruthlessly ambitious church. I want to get you started on the very, very beginning of the plot that really doesn't tell you anything about how the novel ends or even the middle, but it'll give you a flavor for whether you want to read this novel. In a city which we know as Rome, a priest from a religious order, Brother Diaz, is tasked with shepherding a thief, an otherwise ne'er-do-well that they found on the streets, to Troy in the east. This thief, they believe, is the heir to the throne in Troy. The idea being that they can unite both East and West and thereby control both. And hey, what's more pliable than a thief that owes everything to you? So Brother Diaz, hoping for this lucrative position, his hopes and dreams are shattered, and instead he gets a thankless task. And he's going to be accompanied by several others who, having all been excommunicated by the church, are compelled by a papal binding to accompany and safeguard this thief named Alex to Troy. And as you might expect, Abercrombie gives us some really interesting characters to enjoy. The first is Balthazar. Balthazar is a necromancer. He's brilliant, he's arrogant, and he wants to do anything he can to remove that papal binding from him so he can go on his way. The second is an elf named Sunny, who is excommunicated solely because she's an elf. The elves in this world that Abercrombie is giving us are the enemy, and none of them are believed to be capable of salvation in the church. So Sunny is found from a circus, and she has a unique ability to stay hidden in shadows. The next character is Baptiste. She's kind of a jack of all trades. She's handy with a knife, and she would be happy to inform you that she's done everything at least once. So there's a certain amount of cockiness behind Baptiste. The next is Viga, who is a Norse female warrior who also happens to be a werewolf, and she has a really hard time controlling what she does when she's a werewolf. So that is very interesting. And the last is Jacob of Thorn. Jacob is essentially a paladin who has this broke down body and spirit because he's been alive fighting crusades against the elves for centuries. The man cannot die. And together, this group of individuals will be known as the Chapel of Expediency. Notice the word expediency. That's very important. This group is not intended to act righteously. They are not intended to act in a holy manner whatsoever. As you can guess, the Chapel of Expediency is composed of individuals who, if they died, the church would not bat an eye about and feel absolutely no remorse. And their only reward for success is being allowed to live, and rather than be burned at the stake as heretics and excommunicants. In short, I think it's safe to characterize this group as wayward, unholy, and very, very reluctant. Now, for a note that may disappoint some of you, this novel is vastly different than The First Law. If you only want to read something that has similar plot points to The First Law, you'll be disappointed by this novel. However, I don't think that's a criticism. What you're going to get here is still classic Joe Abercrombie. What you find is Abercrombie at his usual top-notch self. And it should not surprise you that this novel is character-driven. And if that's the case, Abercrombie really needs to make sure that he crafts characters that we readers are going to be invested in, that we're going to enjoy. And in my opinion, he nails it. And frankly, in my view, there was no way that he wasn't going to nail it. Each of the characters are unique in personality, talents, and motives. They're unlike what you might expect from a typical fantasy novel, and I enjoyed that. Abercrombie drafts dialogue that is suitable to each character. So in other words, it's not, you have different characters, but they all talk the same. Abercrombie doesn't do that, so he's consistent here. The diction and the way they speak is entirely consistent with the background of the character and what they would say in a given situation. And if you read Abercrombie, you know that what he excels in is drafting characters that are morally ambiguous. In an Abercrombie world, moral failure is a must. Evil is laced with good, and sometimes the characters that are considered evil or unscrupulous might actually act out of a pure motive. And so nothing is black and white in The Devils, and you should expect that with every Abercrombie novel, and he doesn't disappoint here. And as for the institutions, they're also morally ambiguous. The religion of the papacy in this novel is governed by a normal of moral hierarchical principles. However, failure to honor some of the lesser ones, so long as you achieve the higher hierarchical good, is okay. So for example, it's okay to murder so long as it's sanctioned by the church. And all of this is very Machiavellian, where the ends justify the means at all times, no matter how distasteful, corrupt, or evil. The dialogue in The Devils is phenomenal, in my opinion. It has all the obscenity and wit that you expect from Abercrombie. And it also really shines forth during combat. And I think that's a unique thing that you see in The Devils that maybe you don't see as much in the other novels. The actual dialogue and wit between the characters during combat situations. And it's a poor analogy, but it's a little bit like reading a Marvel comic in that respect. However, don't be put off by that. It's rather limited and it's well done. And so there is a larger question in The Devils, and it's this: who are the monsters? And to find that out, you're going to have to read it for yourself. But it is really the question that pervades throughout this novel. Hey, for all the reasons I've mentioned, this novel is a 5 out of 5. Again, if you're expecting First Law in this novel, you're going to be disappointed. But I don't think that's a valid reason to criticize this, because it stands on its own and it will be the first of a trilogy. And if you disagree and you're expecting it to be First Law and you didn't like the novel on that basis, well, you're just wrong. So anyhow, please remember to like and subscribe. Have a great day and God bless.